Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well and are having a flare-free day. Thank you so much for coming to my channel today. This is also the very first video of a series of videos I am doing on my channel all around endometriosis and fertility. Before we dive into today's video, I do want to do an acknowledgement that the topic of discussion may be heavy in nature. It may bring forward unwanted feelings, emotions, or memories that you're just not quite ready to take on in the heart space or head space today. So trust me, I know the roller coaster of emotions that can come with endo and fertility. If you need to take a step away from today's video, I truly understand. No hard feelings. I have tons of other videos to watch on my channel if you want to learn more about endo. And I promise you that this video will be here whenever you want to refer to it when you're in the heart space and head space to take on the information. In between then and now, if you do need to take a step away from today's video, I want you to know that I am cheering you. I'm already getting emotional. I am cheering you on. I am thinking of you. I am in your corner 100% of the way, and I hope that whatever you are hoping for in your conception or fertility journey, that it works out for you. So just know that I'm in your corner. If you don't feel it day to day, someone random on the internet is thinking of you and cheering you on. All of that in the mix, I will be diving into the topic of discussion now, which is the different theories that exist on how endometriosis may impact our fertility. Now first, a little background on endometriosis more specifically. Endometriosis is a full body systemic inflammatory disease where tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside of the uterus. Now again, I really want to stress here on my channel, it's not just a reproductive disease. Endo has been found on every organ in the human body, including within our diaphragm, around our bowels, and yes, within the pelvic cavity. Endometriosis is notorious for being labeled as a silent battle or disease because the symptoms that present may not be visible to the naked eye. A lot of the symptoms that present with endo take the forefront when discussing endo. Painful periods, chronic pelvic pain, fatigue, painful bowel movements, painful sex or intercourse, all of these things can come to the forefront. But one of the symptoms of endometriosis that is often overlooked or not talked about as in depth as it should or skirted around in discussions because of the sensitive nature that can come with it is fertility challenges with endometriosis. Oftentimes when we are trying to conceive and at the stage of our life when we are ready to take on that next chapter of parenthood, that's when a lot of individuals uncover the painful reality and realization that conceiving may not be as straightforward as they once thought. In my belief, the silence is also tied to how society and healthcare systems approach reproductive health. Conversations around fertility are often postponed to later stages of life, and many are left unaware of the profound impacts that endometriosis may have on our fertility and reproductive health. By the time we actually connect the dots between endometriosis and fertility challenges, the emotional toll can at that point be overwhelming. Breaking the silence, again with this video before we dive into it, is all around education, advocacy, awareness. Infertility, just as much as physical pain, should be taken seriously and to be addressed early. As I've always done, a medical disclaimer that I'm not a doctor or a fertility specialist. I'm just an endometriosis patient that has done a lot of research around endo and fertility, and I'm excited to share that information with you today. Of course, if you have any new, changing, or recurring symptoms when it comes to endo or questions around your fertility journey, it's definitely important to go talk to a doctor that you trust around your questions and symptoms that you are having. Endometriosis, fertility, and pregnancy complications. What are the connections? I want to start off by saying that having a diagnosis of endometriosis is not a guarantee that you will suffer or experience fertility challenges, but it is more common among those of us living with endometriosis. Individuals experiencing fertility challenges or infertility are 6 to 8 times more likely to suffer with endometriosis as well. When it comes to endometriosis patients more specifically, approximately 30 to 50% of patients with endo experience fertility challenges as a symptom of the disease. A 2023 study sheds light on this connection between endometriosis and fertility challenges. 18.9% of individuals living with endo experienced pregnancy loss at some stage of their journey, compared to 17.3% in the general population living without endo. Now, while the difference may seem small, so 18.9 with endo compared to 17.3, it's like a small slight dip between the two, it points to a subtle yet important correlation. Now, the 2023 study also highlighted that 3.9% of individuals with endo experienced 2 pregnancy losses, compared to, again, a slight dip to 3.5% in the general population when it came to 2 or more pregnancy losses. The numbers indicate that while pregnancy loss is multifaceted and complex, endometriosis definitely can be a contributing factor to individuals' fertility journey. Now, a heavy statistic here, but an important one to note, is that when it comes to pregnancy loss in the general population, so with endo in the mix or not, 26% of all pregnancies ending in loss, unfortunately. And if you are one of those individuals watching, know that my heart goes out to you and I'm thinking of you. For endometriosis patients, these numbers may feel heavy and daunting to hear, but it also underscores the importance of being proactive when it comes to your endometriosis journey. If you have pains and discomfort and symptoms, to talk to your doctor that you trust to get ahead of it. It's an opportunity to use those developed plans to optimize fertility and to monitor pregnancies closely. Now, when it comes to pregnancy complications, there are statistics that come forward with endometriosis. When we look at preterm births, this refers to the birth before 37 weeks of pregnancy. According to an analysis of several studies, people with endometriosis are 1.5 times more likely to experience preterm birth compared to the general population. Preeclampsia is also a pregnancy complication that can show up with those with endometriosis. Preeclampsia is a condition that causes a sudden rise in blood pressure during pregnancy. Now, a 2017 study did outline that endometriosis is a precursor or a risk factor for developing preeclampsia during pregnancy. Now, an interesting fact, during my pregnancy journey with endometriosis, I did have to have my blood pressure monitored extra during my 3rd trimester because it was elevated. They had outlined to me here in Canada that if I did have a second pregnancy, that I would have to be monitored closely for preeclampsia because at the end of this pregnancy, my blood pressure was at the higher range. Additional pregnancy complications with endometriosis in the mix include placenta previa. I had placenta previa during my pregnancy journey, and again, it was a term that I had never heard about before and I was never made aware of until it was like at my doorstep and was like, hey, you have placenta previa. Basically, placenta previa, a condition where the placenta sits very low in the womb and fully or partially covering the cervix. So with this in mind, what they explained to me was that the baby has to exit during birth, but sometimes the placenta can block that exit. And so if the baby is pushing down on the placenta, it can be very dangerous for the mother and the baby during birthing process. It often corrects itself during the pregnancy process and the development of the baby. A 2016 study found that the likelihood of having placenta previa is significantly higher for those with endometriosis. Additional pregnancy complication could be the risk of having a cesarean delivery or a C-section. Research into the full scope of endometriosis and the impacts it has on an individual, including fertility challenges, has historically been low. Data that we see today around endometriosis and its impacts on fertility journeys may be higher, may be more impactful, depending on if research continues and if endo gets the funding that it deserves. I fully believe and acknowledge in this video that I am probably just scratching the surface of what exists today when it comes to endo research. The true effects of endometriosis may be more in depth than we originally see at face value with today's current research. The first theory that exists on how endometriosis may impact our fertility is pelvic adhesions and organ distortion. Endometriosis often has the ability to create what are called adhesions, which are bands of scar tissue that form within the body. I like to call them spider webs. These adhesions or spider webs often form when the body tries to heal from inflammation that is often seen at the site of endometriosis lesions. These adhesions do more harm than good. Here's how pelvic adhesions and organ distortion may impact our fertility. Tethering of organs. Oftentimes these adhesions create web-like structures that pull and distort organs away from their natural position in the body. The ovaries may become tethered to the uterus or to the pelvic wall, restricting their movement and potentially making it harder for an egg to be released. Fallopian tubes can become twisted or distorted in shape, or again stuck to another organ or tissue, which may ultimately block the pathway for the egg and sperm to meet. Another way that pelvic adhesions and organ distortion can impact fertility is the obstruction of fallopian tubes. If adhesions form around the fallopian tubes, again, this can block or even narrow the passageway for the egg and sperm to meet properly. Even if there isn't a full blockage or a complete blockage, adhesions pulling or distorting that fallopian tube and the shape that it's supposed to naturally be in can again make it difficult for that egg to travel properly to the uterus. Adhesions can also impact our blood flow to reproductive organs, reducing their overall function over time because again of that organ distortion or pelvic adhesions pulling things where they shouldn't be. Ovaries, for an example, may receive less proper blood flow, potentially impacting egg quality and hormone production. Adhesions themselves can be a site of constant chronic pain. Both pain and inflammation can indirectly impact our hormones and our overall reproductive health. Just like spider webs, adhesions are sneaky. They often grow quietly, unnoticed, until they ultimately cause enough distortion to impact function. Adhesions can often be removed or treated surgically. Surgery can have the ability to restore some normalcy to pelvic anatomy, improving fertility outcomes for some. Ultimately, when reproductive organs are not in the right place or in the right shape, it can ultimately impact their function and their ability to support our reproductive health. The second theory when it comes to how endometriosis may impact our fertility is inflammation in the body. Endometriosis causes chronic systemic inflammation in the body. Now, inflammation sounds like a bad word at times, but inflammation is natural and healthy and needed in our body and is a natural response from our immune system to encourage healing and to protect sites of injury from further damage. However, when inflammation becomes chronic or excessive, as is often the case with endometriosis, it can have widespread impacts on the body. Now, the first way that inflammation plays a role when it comes to endo infertility is that endometriosis lesions found throughout the body are highly sensitive to estrogen, meaning that if there's a rise in estrogen throughout specific phases of our menstrual cycle, so think about right after you have your period, estrogen starts to rise, and more specifically around the time of ovulation when estrogen is peaked or at its highest level in the body. It can make endometriosis lesions more active or noticeable. This can cause pain and additional inflammation to healthy tissue that is surrounding that endo lesion in the body. When endometriosis lesions activate because of that rise in estrogen, it sends a signal to the rest of your body that there's a abnormal or foreign growth in the body that needs to be cleaned up. This triggers your immune system to release additional inflammatory molecules to again help protect that body and site of constant inflammation from further injury and damage. It's an attempt from your immune system and body to help heal that area where the lesion exists and is causing that inflammation to occur. So with endometriosis lesions causing inflammation and additional inflammatory molecules sent from the immune system to that site of inflammation can create a state of chronic inflammation taking place, because again, without endometriosis excision surgery, that lesion is going to remain in the body, constantly creating inflammation. Now, the cherry on top of all of this is that endometriosis lesions like to create their own estrogen. But wait, doesn't estrogen make endometriosis lesions more active and noticeable, and then there's that whole cycle of inflammation? Yes. This is where I say estrogen and endometriosis are like their own worst enemies. Endometriosis lesions are able to make their own estrogen through an enzyme known as aromatase. Endometriosis lesions with that additional boost of estrogen in that localized spot where the lesion exists contributes again to that inflammatory process. What does this have to do with fertility? The inflammatory process can often lead to additional scar tissue to be developed or adhesions to develop. And I've mentioned all about adhesions and their impact on our reproductive health. Inflammation is at the core of that pelvic adhesion and scar tissue development. Inflammation exacerbated or made worse by endometriosis lesions often also have an ability to impact reproductive hormones like estrogen and progesterone. The hormone progesterone is responsible for calming the immune system. It's that cool, calming, collecting vibe, the golden ticket that all of us endo warriors are searching for. It really does help relax our muscles. It provides a soothing impact to our body. Research has shown, though, that people with endometriosis often present what's called progesterone resistance, known as PGE2, meaning that those of us living with endometriosis may not necessarily feel the full impacts of that cool, calming, collected vibe, that muscle relaxation, that soothing, calming impact that progesterone produces. During the luteal phase of our menstrual cycle, so that phase right before the time we bleed or have our period, progesterone typically takes the lead. It works to thicken the uterine lining to prepare for potential pregnancy to take place and for a fertilized egg to implant. In some cases, especially those with endometriosis that have, again, that heightened resistance to the effects of progesterone levels might be too low, or the uterine lining doesn't respond normally to the hormone like it should. This creates a less than ideal environment for a fertilized egg to implant, potentially leading to fertility struggles in that luteal phase, or again, even that early pregnancy loss. An inflammatory environment may also have an ability to impact our egg quality, sperm survival rates, and embryo development, compounding fertility challenges further. The third theory that exists regarding how endo may impact our fertility revolves around ovulatory disturbances. Typically, ovulation happens like clockwork. The dominant ovarian follicle matures, bursts open or ruptures from that ovary, and releases an egg within 38 hours of a surge in luteinizing hormone, or LH. But in some cases, this process doesn't go as planned. One of the reasons that this doesn't happen like clockwork is due to luteinizing unruptured follicle syndrome, sometimes called trapped egg syndrome. LUF syndrome, unfortunately, is common among those of us with endometriosis as well as those with PCOS. This happens when the follicle in the ovary looks as though it's doing everything that it's supposed to. It matures and even undergoes the luteinizing process where a follicle starts to secrete progesterone. However, with LUF syndrome, the follicle doesn't rupture to release an egg. Without the egg being released, natural forms of conception and pregnancy ultimately can't take place. LUF syndrome is a tough diagnosis to spot as well. From doing research, LUF syndrome may not disrupt your menstrual cycle. You'll still get your period. Everything might seem normal. Hormonal tests around day 21 to show progesterone levels, they may dictate that ovulation took place. Even basal body temperature tracking and endometrial biopsies will demonstrate that ovulation had taken place. But beneath the surface, that dominant follicle didn't release an egg. This makes LUF very hard to diagnose and to catch early on. It often isn't detectable with standardized tests alone. One way to diagnose LUF is through a series of vaginal ultrasounds to track the ovulation cycle, along with the absence of free peritoneal fluid, which is fluid that would typically appear around the time of ovulation. The next theory when it comes to endometriosis and fertility impacts revolves around luteal phase defects. In the menstrual cycle, we have 4 unique phases. Now, the luteal phase is the phase right before the time of our period and right after ovulation. It is a crucial phase when we look at fertility. Luteal phase defects refers to a shortened or inadequate luteal phase, which can prevent the uterine lining from properly supporting implantation. Luteal phase defects, unfortunately, again, are very common with those with endometriosis. And here are the reasons why. Again, that progesterone resistance. Again, the uterine lining may not be as responsive as it should, especially in the luteal phase. This can prevent the endometrium, so that inner lining of the uterus, from changing to support implantation and early pregnancy. Inflammation. Again, inflammation can disrupt our normal hormone levels, especially the signals sent during the luteal phase. Ovarian endometriomas are the third, also known as chocolate cysts. I have a video all about chocolate cysts on my channel and you can check it out up here. Ovarian endometriomas or chocolate cysts have an ability to impact the function of the corpus luteum. This is the structure that forms after ovulation and produces progesterone during the luteal phase. Again, if progesterone isn't there to kind of calm everything down, the healthy environment for fertilization, uterine lining thickening, and egg implantation is simply negatively impacted. It can ultimately exacerbate the shortened or inadequate luteal phase, impacting fertility. Finally, the stress and systemic inflammation caused by endometriosis throughout the body can again interfere with the regulation of ovulation and hormone production. This can ultimately impact luteal phase dysfunction. It is clear that there are several theories as to how endometriosis may impact someone's fertility. And I truly believe that we are scratching the surface here, and there may be more reasons out there that I didn't come across in my research. I know that this might be a lot to process and it can feel overwhelming, especially if you live with endometriosis and you're on your fertility journey right now. I want to remind you here that your journey is defined by your strength, your resilience, and your courage to keep moving forward. With the right care and compassionate team on your side, you can navigate this journey in a way that works for you. The next video in this series coming out is all around the endometriosis fertility index and the staging of endometriosis and how it may impact our fertility. The video after that is around fertility treatments and endometriosis, how to assess fertility with endometriosis and tracking options, as well as a video around the emotional impacts that the fertility journey can have with those of us living with endometriosis. If there's anything that I've missed that you've been told in your fertility journey that may have been a theory as to how your fertility was impacted and you feel comfortable and safe to share it, feel free to do so in the comments, as I'm sure it will help somebody else in their journey to find answers. With that, I cannot wait to talk to you on the next video in this series. Bye.